The galaxy was not silent that day. It trembled in whispers and fear, for a ship had entered human space. A ship larger than any human vessel, a ship carrying the dark banners of the Vorak, the apex predators of the known stars. Every species who had ever met them spoke only in terror, for the Vorak were hunters, not conquerors. They did not simply defeat their enemies. They erased them. They turned mighty fleets into drifting carcasses left as warnings to others. And now that same monstrous shadow had crossed into the quiet sector where the human colony of Lyris 9 floated in its calm orbit around a pale blue star. The human settlers on Lyris 9 woke to alarms and skyfire. Their world had never seen war before. They were farmers, miners. Children playing in streets built on fresh soil. Their colony still smelled of paint and iron, yet above them hung a warship that blotted out the light. A vessel layered with black scales like a beast from the deep void, each scale larger than a human home, weapons bristling from its sides, glowing with strange energy. The people looked up and could not even imagine resistance. Their defense fleet was nothing more than a few patrol ships, tiny insects before the beast. Across the galaxy, the signal spread. A Vorak flagship entering human territory. Every listening post, every rival empire tuned in to watch for this. Was history. No one knew why the Vorak had come. They rarely moved without reason, and when they moved, someone always died. Yet for some reason they waited. The warship did not open fire. It did not bombard Lyris 9. Instead, it hung there, silent, patient, watching like a predator, studying prey before the strike-in. The Terran assembly panic rippled through the council. Chambers generals argued, admirals shouted, politicians pleaded. There was no chance of victory. They all knew it. A single Vorak flagship could burn Earth itself if it wished. Human fleets were young compared to the centuries of other empires. They were explorers, dreamers, settlers. They were not ready to face the apex predator of the galaxy, and yet, attack came. Only a single transmission. The message came without words. It was an image, the towering figure of the Vorak apex himself standing in a throne chamber lined with bones of creatures long extinct. His body was scaled and armored, his eyes glowing with a cold fire. His voice was not sound, but vibration crawling into every mind that saw the message. The translation was simple and cruel. Bring me a human, no fleets, no armies. One human must come to me alone. The chamber and the assembly fell silent. Some believed it was a trap. Some thought it a ritual before slaughter. Others whispered that perhaps humanity had already been marked for extinction, and this was merely the prelude. Fear spread through the colony's news stations repeated the words again and again, bring me a human. No one understood why the predator would make such a demand. No one could answer what he wanted from a species the galaxy still called prey on Lyris 9. The colonists huddled in shelters, staring at the sky. Children asked if the monster ship would eat them. Mothers held their children tighter. Fathers gripped tools as if they were weapons, knowing they could do nothing. The warship did not move, but its shadow reached every heart and mind like a claw around their throats above the planet's satellites. Failed communication relays went silent one by one, until only the Vorak signal remained repeating its demand. Human history had seen fear before: the darkness of oceans, the endless night of space, the burning wars of Earth, yet this was different. This was a fear that pressed against the soul because every other species who had ever faced the Vorak had fallen. None had been spared, none had walked away. So why now? Why? Humanity whispers spread that perhaps the Vorak had found some weakness in humans. Perhaps they sought to mark the species in some cruel way, but others suggested something stranger. That maybe, just maybe, the Vorak had seen something in humanity worth testing. Whatever the truth, the demand was clear, and time was running out. For 3 days the ship waited unmoving above Lyris. 9 fleets of other empires lingered at the edge of the sector, silent watchers, eager to see what would happen. Some prayed the Vorak would finally break their silence and attack. Others prayed humanity might somehow surprise them, but no one truly believed humans could survive such an encounter. Yet within the Terran assembly, a single name began to circulate, whispered at first, then spoken louder: Elias Valen. A commander once known not for victories, but for refusing to surrender when surrounded. His reputation was not one of strength, but of defiance. He was not the strongest, he was not the smartest, But he carried something dangerous, something the predators might not expect a refusal to break no matter the cost. As Elias prepared to leave, whispers of dread and hope followed him. People asked why him? Why one man against the darkness? But others began to sense that this was not simply a test of weapons, but of something deeper, something that Vorak had never found in the galaxy before as he stepped aboard the shuttle to ascend toward. The beast in the sky children waved not with joy, but with desperate belief that one man might hold back extinction. Shuttle rose through the atmosphere, engines trembling as it carried him closer to the massive shadow above the planet windows. Filled with the monstrous shape of the flagship, black scales glistening like oceans of stone. Eyes of light staring from its surface, as if the ship itself were alive. When the docking clamps closed around the shuttle, Elias felt the pull not of gravity but of fear itself pressing against his chest, the kind of fear that made lesser species collapse before even stepping inside. He walked into the corridors of the Vorak flagship, the walls alive with faint movements, as if the ship itself breathed. The air was heavy, metallic, carrying the scent of blood and iron. Every step echoed like footsteps inside a predator's ribcage. The silence was not empty, it was watchful, countless unseen eyes studying him, waiting for weakness, testing his breath, his heartbeat, his will. The path led him deeper into the ship, toward a chamber vast and terrible, lined with the remains of worlds conquered, a throne carved from bone and metal. At its center, upon it, sat the apex predator himself, larger than any human nightmare, claws resting on the arms of the throne, fangs bared in what might have been a smile or a threatened. Yet the predator did not strike, he did not roar. Instead, he leaned forward, his burning eyes locked onto Elias, and in a voice that filled the chamber without sound, he asked the question that would shape the fate of humanity. Why does your kind not Nalilas stood inside the chamber of the Vorak flagship, surrounded by shadows and towering figures, their scales reflecting the dim glow of crimson light that poured from the walls like fire trapped in stone. The throne of the apex predator loomed before him, carved from the bones of creatures that no human eye had ever seen before, each one a trophy of a hunt, each one a story of power and death. The air was heavy, as if the weight of 1,000 dead civilizations pressed upon his chest, and yet Elias did not lower his head. His boots echoed against the floor, each step louder than the last, though his heart pounded like thunder in his ribs. The Vorak warlords lined the chamber, their bodies immense, their claws tapping against the ground with restless hunger, their eyes fixed on the lone human who dared to walk into their nest of predators for countless generations. Every species that entered such a chamber had knelt, instantly driven down by the sheer pressure of predator instinct that flowed from the Vorak. It was a force like gravity, pulling prey into submission. A primal scream that echoed inside the bones of the weak. Yet Elias remained standing, his shoulders squared, his eyes burning, not with defiance but with a steady, unyielding calm that made even the hunters shift uneasily. Apex predator rose from his throne, his form towering like a mountain of flesh and scale, his voice a low rumble that was not spoken but felt inside every mind in the chamber, like claws scraping across stone. He declared that humanity would be tested not by blade, not by fire, but by something deeper, something no other prey had endured. He explained that the Vorak hunted not only flesh but spirit. They broke not only bodies but the will that guided them, and in breaking that will they proved themselves the true masters of the galaxy. The challenge began with silence. A silence so deep that it pressed into Elias like a storm. His vision flickered, and in its place rose images drawn from the predator's mind. He saw oceans of blood worlds, burning under the shadow of the Vorak fleet's entire species on their knees, begging for mercy that never came. He felt the terror of billions, as if their screams poured into his skull. And yet, even as the vision clawed at him, Elias stood, still breathing slow, forcing each breath to be his own, not the one the predator demanded. The warlords hissed, their voices like blades scraping together, for they could sense resistance, and resistance in prey was rare. The apex predator intensified the vision, turning it inward now. Elias saw himself, broken chains wrapped around his arms, his body shattered, his people crying out for him to kneel. He saw earth in flames. He saw the faces of his colony children, their eyes filled with betrayal as if his refusal had doomed them all. The weight was unbearable. The pain was not physical, but soul-deep, a crushing force designed to bend his spirit until it cracked. Elias closed his eyes. He remembered the faces of the people he left behind, the children who waved as his shuttle lifted from Lyris. He remembered the words of his mother spoken long before he wore a uniform that humans do not survive, because Elias closed his eyes. Because they are the strongest or the fastest, but because they refuse to give up, he clung to those words like iron, and when he opened his eyes again, the vision faltered, for he whispered 3 simple words, not for the predator, but for himself. We do not. Kneel. The chamber shifted, as if the very air recoiled. The warlords roared, some in rage, others in confusion. They had seen prey fight with weapons. They had seen prey fight with teeth and claws, but never had they seen prey resist the predators. Aura, the force that had broken empires. Elias stood like a stone in a storm, battered but unmoved. His hands trembled, his body screamed with pain, yet his spirit refused to bend. The apex predator's gaze sharpened, glowing brighter with interest, not anger. He stepped down from his throne, his massive claws clicking against the floor each step, shaking the chamber he towered above. Elias, his shadow swallowing the human whole, and yet Elias did not step back. The predator leaned closer, his eyes burning into Ilias's soul, and with a voice like thunder, asked, "What gives your kind such strength?" Elias answered, not with pride, not with arrogance, but with a quiet voice, steady and human. He said that strength is not found in dominance or fear, but in choice. That humans are weak, fragile, short-lived, and yet they choose to stand together. They choose to protect one another even when death is certain. They choose to walk into darkness, not because they are fearless, but because someone must. Hold the light, the warlords hissed again, some mocking the words, others strangely silent, but the apex predator did not move. He studied. Elias, his claws flexing, his breath heavy like a storm wind, he extended one hand, talons inches from the humans' chest, and unleashed another wave of power, a storm of visions so violent they cracked the walls of the chamber. Elias saw himself as prey being hunted through endless forests, lost tearing at his heels, fangs closing around his neck. He felt the terror of every animal ever hunted, the primal fear that every creature knows in its bones. He felt his own knees weaken, his chest collapse as if the weight of the galaxy itself pressed down. But even then he remembered his words. He remembered the colony children looking to him not as prey, but as hope, and with every ounce of will he forced himself upright. He raised his head and looked directly into the burning eyes of the predator, and though his voice was ragged and broken, he repeated, "Again, we do not kneel." A silence fell across the chamber, deeper than any before. The warlords froze their claws, hovering in the air, their jaws open but voiceless, for in that moment something impossible had happened. A human had faced the predators. Aura, and had not been broken. The apex predator's eyes narrowed, but not in rage, in something far more dangerous, curiosity. The challenge had not ended, but it had changed, for the predator had seen something new, something his kind had hunted for eons but never found. A prey that did not kneel, a prey that chose defiance. Even when death was certain, the apex predator straightened his form, towering above Elias's gaze, sweeping across the watching warlords, and he declared that this human would face trials beyond anything yet seen, that humanity itself would be weighed not out by its fleets, not by its weapons, but by the spirit that burned within its weakest member. Ilias felt his body weaken, his breath ragged, sweat dripping down his face, yet his spirit held the fire still alive inside him, the fire that refused to bow, the fire that told the predators of the galaxy that humanity, though small, though fragile, though young, would not kneel before the strongest hunter in existence. Chamber grew darker, the silence stretching like a blade waiting to strike. The apex predator turned his gaze back to Elias, and his voice echoed like thunder, promising that the true trial had only just begun. Elias stood in the heart of the predators' throne chamber, surrounded by towering Vorak warriors, their scaled bodies glimmering under the blood-red light that pulsed from the walls like the heartbeat of some ancient beast. Each warlord stared at him with eyes that burned with hunger and rage, claws scraping against the stone floor as if waiting for the command to strike, yet no command came for the apex. Predator himself sat upon his throne carved from bones of beasts that had lived and died before humans had even learned fire. His shape massive, his presence crushing, and still his gaze fixed only on the lone human who refused to bow. The silence was heavy, pressing into Elise's mind thicker than air, heavier than gravity. It was the silence of the hunt when the predator circles unseen, and prey knows the strike is near. His chest burned with each breath, his knees wanted to bend, but he forced them. Straight the warlords hissed low, angry that this small soft creature did not collapse at once for every other species. Had broken before this aura, every other prey had fallen, shaking and begging before the apex predators will yet hear. Stood Elias, trembling yet unbroken. The apex predator rose from his throne, each step a quake that shook the chamber of the walls. Alive with the faint echo of growls, the giant leaned forward, his eyes glowing like molten suns, and his voice entered not through ears but through bone and soul, a voice that could not be ignored. You are weak, your kind is fragile, your lives are short, you bleed easily, you die quickly. Why do you stand when all others Nelius? Felt the voice tear at his mind. It was more than words, it was a storm. It carried the weight of every hunt the predator had ever made, the terror of prey across 1,000 worlds, clawing at his spirit, trying to make him crumble. He saw visions that were not his own, visions of empires, falling fleets, shattered creatures kneeling as the Vorok devoured them. He saw the history of galaxies written in blood, and all of it screamed at him to kneel. But he remembered the faces of the colonists. He left behind the children who waved as his shuttle rose into the sky. He remembered the words he carried in his heart, that humans survive not because they are strong, but because they never give up. He clenched his fists and lifted his head, and though his body shook, he whispered with a voice that barely carried, "We do not kneel." The warlords roared in outrage, their voices like thunder in a storm some struck the floor with their claws, sending sparks into the air, for no prey had ever spoken such words in the predator's chamber. No prey had ever resisted the pull of fear that was older than stars, yet Elias stood, his spirit battered, but alive. The apex predator tilted his head, the glow in his eyes narrowing not with anger, but with interest. He lifted one claw the size of a sword, and with emotion. The chamber darkened, the air grew heavy. Elias gasped as the weight pressed harder. This was no longer vision, this was trial. His mind flooded with terror that was not his own. He saw Earth burning, its cities collapsing, its oceans boiling. He heard screams of his people. He saw his own hands covered in blood, as if he had failed them all. The predator whispered again, "Do you see it? Do you feel it? This is the truth. Your kind is nothing but prey." Elias felt his knees weaken, sweat poured down his face, his lungs ached as if the air had turned to stone, but he bit down hard until he tasted blood, and through the haze of terror he whispered again, "No, we do not kneel." The chamber shook, the predators hissed louder, confused, angered, unsettled, for they felt something that should not exist. The apex predator stepped closer, his shadow swallowing Elias whole. He bent down until his eyes were level with the human, his breath hot and heavy like fire from a forge, and he asked again, "If you cannot be broken, then tell me what gives your kind such strength." Elias forced his trembling body to remain upright. His voice cracked, but steady. He said, "Humans are weak, yes. Humans are fragile, yes. But strength is not always muscle or claw. Sometimes strength is choice. We choose to stand together. We choose to protect, even when death waits for us. We walk into the dark not because we are fearless, but because someone must hold the light." The warlords hissed mockery, filling the chamber. Some laughed in low snarls, others growled in rage. Yet beneath it there was another sound, silence, the kind of silence that comes when something unknown walks into the world. The apex predator's claws tightened around the arm of his throne, leaving marks in the bone, yet he did not strike, he did not silence Elias. He studied him like a puzzle he had hunted for ages, but never solved. With another wave of his claw, the predator unleashed visions sharper than knives. Elias saw himself hunted through forests, claws ripping at his heels, fangs closing on his neck. He felt the primal terror of prey, the helpless scream locked in every creature's blood. The urge to fall and beg to surrender, his body trembled, His legs shook. His chest caved under the crushing weight, and yet inside his mind he held to the one thought, the one fire that could not be taken. Humans do not kneel. Slowly, painfully, he raised his head, his eyes bloodshot. His lips cracked, but he stared directly into the burning gaze of the apex predator, and he whispered again. Broken but unyielding, we do not kneel. The chamber froze, warlords motionless. Their breath caught the silence deeper than death, for in that moment a human had stood against the full might of predator instinct, and had not fallen. The apex predator's eyes narrowed, then flared brighter, not with rage, but with something rare. Curiosity, respect, interest. He spoke into every mind present. The trial is not over. The prey has not broken. We will test deeper. We will test further. Humanity will be weighed, not in flesh, not in fleets, but in spirit. Elias could barely stand, his legs numb, his chest raw with pain, but he did not fall. He held his ground. His body might break, his bones might shatter, but his spirit remained unbent, and the predators of the galaxy, for the first time, felt the impossible. The fear not of prey, but of prey that refused to kneel. The apex predator turned back to his throne, his voice echoing across the chamber like thunder, promising that the true test was only beginning, and that the fate of humanity would be decided. In trials yet to come, the chamber of the predators grew darker as the apex predator returned to his throne, his massive form towering over Elias like a mountain of living stone. The Vorak warlords hissed low, their claws scratching the ground. Sparks flying in the gloom, the air thick with the hunger of creatures who had never before seen a prey survive. This long never before had any being resisted the weight of the predator's will, and now this small, fragile human stood before them, trembling, bleeding inside, yet still unbroken. The apex predator raised one claw, and the chamber shifted, walls fading into shadows, until Elias stood alone in a space that was not real and not illusion, but something between. His body remained in the chamber, but his mind was dragged into a storm of visions designed to crush his spirit, to tear away his will. The predator's voice thundered through the dark. This is the second trial. Your kind will not be measured by the body, but by the choices you make. Elias found himself standing on a broken plain, the sky burning with fire, ships falling from the heavens, cities crumbling beneath endless flames. Round him millions of human voices screamed for help, their faces twisted with fear, their hands reaching for him. He turned and saw fleets of enemy ships descending upon Earth itself, their weapons bright suns ready to erase everything he knew, and the predator's voice cut through the chaos. You can save them, but to do so, you must sacrifice the colonies. Across the stars, millions must die so billions may live. Will you choose, or will you watch them all burn? The weight of the decision crashed into him, his chest tight, his throat dry, his heart tearing in two. He saw faces of men, women, children on the colonies, smiling, laughing, living their simple lives. He saw Earth, the cradle of his people, a world that had carried humanity through ages of struggle. He saw both in danger, and he was told to choose. He whispered, "No, this is not fair. No one should choose this." But the predator roared again, "You claim strength lies in choice, then choose. Show me what your kind is." Elias dropped to his knees, not in surrender, but in agony, the visions twisting sharper, the screams growing louder, the fire brighter. He wanted to tear his mind away, to shut his eyes, but the images burned even behind his lids. He thought of the colony of Lyris 9, where he had left behind children who waved at him with hope in their eyes. He thought of Earth, where his ancestors slept beneath the soil, where his mother's words still lived in his memory. Humans, do not give up. He felt the predator pushing him, demanding his surrender, demanding that he say he could not bear the choice. And yet slowly, painfully, Elias rose again, his legs shaking, his voice broken, but steady. He said, "Humans do not choose who must die and who must live. We fight for all, even when it is impossible. We do not abandon one. To save the other, we try even when it costs everything. We do not kneel, and we do not surrender our compassion." The visions twisted harder, the fire rising higher, the screams sharper. The predator sought to break him by showing him failure, by showing him the weight of choices that could never be won. Elias saw himself falling again and again, worlds dying because he refused to choose. He saw the predator laughing as humanity burned, yet he held to his words, his heart screaming that there must always be another path, that humans survive not by perfection but by trying when all others give up. The predator's voice pressed deeper. You will lose everything, your people will die, your colonies will burn, and still you refuse to choose, then you are a fool. Elias raised his head, his face pale, his body weak, but his eyes steady, and he whispered, then I will be a fool, because a fool who tries is stronger than a predator who only takes. The chamber flickered around him, the visions shattering like glass, until once more he stood in the throne room, sweat pouring down his face, his breath ragged, his body trembling. The warlords hissed louder, claws raking the stone walls in fury. Some demanded his death, others demanded the trial end, but the apex predator raised his claw. In silence fell. The apex predator leaned forward, his gaze locked onto Elias, his eyes burning brighter than before. In them was no anger, no mockery, but something that made the warlords shift uneasily, respect the predator's voice. Rumbled again, you endure, you resist, you refuse to kneel, even when the impossible is placed before you. But this trial is not over. Prey must face the deepest hunt and prove if its spirit can outlast the shadows that break all others. Elias felt the weight of those words, but he stood, his legs shaking, his fists clenched, his heart still burning. He had been shown fear, he had been forced into choices meant to crush him, yet still he lived, still he spoke, still he refused to kneel. And for the first time in the long memory of the Vorak, the chamber of predators fell not into rage but into silence. Heavy and uncertain, for something had shifted. Something had broken, not in the human but in the predators themselves. The apex predator rose fully, his form stretching to the ceiling, his shadow swallowing the chamber. His roar shook the walls, his claws raised as if declaring to all who watch, this prey is not prey. This human will face the final trial, and through it humanity itself will be weighed. Elias stood in the center of the storm, his heart trembling, his breath shallow, his body weak, but his spirit alive like fire burning against endless night. And he whispered once more as the chamber shook with the voice of the predator. We do not kneel. Elias stood trembling in the center of the chamber, his breath sharp, his body shaking from the weight of visions that had almost broken him. Yet his eyes still burned with fire, and his back remained straight. The Vorak warlords circled like beasts hungry for blood, their claws tapping against the stone floor, sparks flying as their low growls filled the air. They had seen prey fight, they had seen prey struggle, but never had they seen prey refuse to bend after so much torment. Never had they seen prey speak words of defiance after being drowned in fear. The chamber itself seemed alive with the tension of a storm waiting to break. The apex predator did not sit now. He stood tall, towering over all his warlords, his shadow filling the chamber, his glowing eyes fixed on Elias's voice rumbled like thunder rolling through bone and blood. This trial is not ended. The first was fear, the second was choice. The third is truth. If you survive this truth, you will show what your kind truly is. If you fail, then your species will be remembered as nothing more than prey. The chamber dissolved again, shadows folding around Elias, his body heavy as chains, his mind pulled into another storm of visions, this one colder, darker, sharper than the last. He stood on a battlefield of silence, the ground cracked, the sky torn apart, stars flickering like dying embers. Around him lay bodies, human and alien alike, scattered, broken, their faces blank with death, the air heavy with ash and smoke. In the distance, he saw a figure rising tall, massive shaped, like himself, yet twisted, a shadow of humanity, black eyes burning with cruelty and greed. The predator's voice whispered through the smoke, this is the truth of your kind. You claim compassion, you claim strength and choice, but your kind destroys itself. You are not only prey, you are predators of your own blood. Your wars burn worlds, your greed devours futures. Your violence leaves only ruin. Look upon the truth of humanity, and tell me why it deserves to stand. Elias staggered forward, his boots crunching on bones that broke like glass. With every step he saw human cities burning, human armies tearing into each other, human children crying as smoke filled the sky. He saw history reflected back at him, endless wars, greed, corruption, betrayal. He heard the predator's voice again, louder, sharper. You are prey not because you are weak, but because you consume yourselves. You kneel not before me, but before your own darkness. The vision pressed deeper claws of guilt tearing into his heart. He remembered the wars of earth. He remembered the scars left by human hands. He remembered the countless graves of soldiers, civilians, and innocents who had fallen to human fire. His throat ached, his heart heavy. The predator was right. Humanity had caused its own suffering. Humanity had destroyed as much as it had built. He fell to one knee, his chest caving under the weight. The warlords roared in victory, believing the prey had finally broken, believing the truth of his kind had shattered his will. But Elias lifted his head, his voice shaking, but still alive. He whispered, yes, we fight, yes, we bleed, yes, we destroy ourselves, but we also rebuild. We rise from the ashes again and again. We learn, we grow. We are not perfect, we are not pure, but we do not stop trying. We are not only our darkness, we are also our light. The shadow of twisted humanity loomed closer, its black eyes staring into his soul. It reached with claws shaped like his own hands, threatening to crush him, to devour him. But Elias stepped forward, not away, his body shaking, his voice raw with pain. He shouted, we are broken, but we are not finished. We fall, but we stand again. We bleed, but we heal. We destroy, but we also create. We are human, and we do not kneel. The battlefield vision shook the ground, splitting the bones into dust. The shadow twisted, roaring with fury, for it cracked and shattered into nothingness.
The flames faded.
The smoke vanished, and Elias found himself once more in the predator's chamber, his body collapsing to his knees, not in surrender, but in exhaustion. His chest heaving, sweat dripping, blood on his lips, his spirit battered but unbroken. Warlords howled, some in rage, others in confusion, their eyes wild, their claws restless, for they could not understand how this fragile creature had stood against fear, against impossible choices, and now against the truth of his own flawed kind, and still refused to kneel. Never in their long memory had prey stood so long, never had prey spoken with such defiance. The chamber was chaos, until the apex predator raised one massive claw, and silence fell like a blade. The apex predator stepped closer, his towering shadow swallowing Elias, his eyes brighter than fire, his voice heavy with something his warlords had never heard before. Not mockery, not contempt, but respect. He spoke, this human does not break. This human sees the darkness of his kind. It still claims the light. This is strength, that is not muscle. This is strength. That is not claw. This is strength of spirit. Elias lifted his head, weak but steady, his voice little more than a whisper, yet filled with steel. We do not kneel. The chamber trembled as if the very ship felt the words. The warlords shifted, restless there, growls echoing, some in fury, others in silence, for they felt something ancient, something impossible. The apex predator leaned down until his eyes were level with Elias, his voice rumbling through the air and into the bones of all who listened. Perhaps you are more than prey. Perhaps your kind carries something the galaxy has not seen before. Elias said nothing, his breath too heavy, his body too broken, yet his eyes still carried the fire that had carried him through every trial. The apex predator straightened, turning his gaze across the gathered warlords. His roar thundered through the chamber, declaring that this human survived the third trial, declaring that humanity would face the final judgment, and that its fate would echo through every corner of the galaxy. The warlords lowered their heads, not in submission to Elias, but in recognition of the words of their apex. Yet many could not hide their unease, their claws restless, their eyes burning with emotions they did not understand. Fear, respect, uncertainty. Elias stood in the center of it all, a fragile human trembling in near collapse, yet standing still. And in that moment, even the strongest predators of the galaxy could not deny the truth he had shown. The chamber darkened. Once more the trial not ended, but paused. The apex predator's voice filling the silence like the sound of mountains breaking. The next trial will decide all. And if you survive, humanity will no longer be called prey. Elias closed his eyes, his body weak, but his spirit still alive, whispering again to himself as if to the children who had waved goodbye on Lyris. 9. We do not kneel. The chamber of the Vorak flagship shook with silence, a silence heavier than thunder, a silence so sharp it felt Like claws scraping against the soul, the apex predator towered above his warlords, his eyes blazing brighter than the red suns of dying worlds. His massive form casting shadows that swallowed Elias's whole, the warlords hissed restless their bodies, trembling not from rage but from something far more dangerous, something they had never known before: uncertainty. They had seen prey resist blades, they had seen prey fight until the end, but never had they seen prey endure trials of fear choice. And truth and still remained standing, Elias swayed on his feet, his body bruised, his blood dripping from his lip, his knees weak as if they might finally break. Yet his back remained straight, and his eyes, though tired, still carried fire, the same fire that had carried him through every trial, the same fire that whispered again and again, "We do not kneel." The apex predator stepped closer, each step shaking the chamber like a heartbeat of a world. The warlords lowered their eyes before him, but his gaze never left Elias. His voice rumbled like mountains breaking. "Your spirit does not bend. Your will does not shatter. You stand where no other prey has ever stood before." Then his words, sharpened like blades, "But strength is not proven only by standing. Strength is proven by what one chooses. When power is already won, the air thickened shadows, curling like smoke around Elias's visions rose again. Sharper, brighter, heavier than before, he saw himself on earth, standing before billions, all of them bowing to him as if he had become king. He saw fleets kneeling in the void, entire empires offering him their thrones. He felt the weight of ultimate power, the power to command the galaxy. The predator's voice pressed into his mind, "This could be your truth, this could be the fate of your kind. Kneel now, and take its surrender not to me, but to yourself. Claim power as your weapon, and your species will rise above. Pray forever." Elias's heart thundered, his chest heavy, his mind screamed with temptation. He saw his people free from fear. He saw Earth safe forever. He saw colonies across the stars, protected by fleets greater than the predators. He saw a future where humanity was not prey but master, and for a moment he felt the pull to take it his. Knees trembled, his breath cracked. He could almost speak the word "yes, but." Then he saw another vision, not given by the predator but rising from his own heart. He saw the children of Lyris 9 waving with hope, not fear. He saw the faces of those who had suffered not because of predators, but because of power abused by their own kind. He remembered the truth he had spoken in the last trial, that humans were not perfect, that humans carried both darkness and light, and he knew that if he surrendered to the dream of power, he would not be saving humanity, he would be dooming it to become another predator. His voice cracked, but it rose clear through the silence. "No, we do not kneel, not to fear, not to power, not to you, not even to ourselves we stand. Because we must, because standing is all we have." Chambers shook, the shadows recoiled, the visions shattered like glass. The warlords hissed louder, some in rage, others in awe. The apex predator's eyes burned brighter, his massive form leaned forward, towering over Elias, yet for the first time there was no threat in his gaze, no hunger, only something ancient, something rare: respect. Apex Predator lowered his head closer until his breath like fire washed over Elias's claws touched the stone floor, and then in a motion that froze the galaxy, he bent his knee, his massive form lowering his head before the lone, fragile human who refused to kneel. The warlords gasped, their roars of fury and disbelief echoing against the walls, for never in all of time had the apex predator knelt. Never had he shown submission to any creature. Never had prey been honored in such a way. The galaxy itself seemed to tremble as the predator's voice filled the chamber, loud enough to reach every mind. Across the stars, this human has shown what no other has shown: strength, not of claw, not of fear, not of conquest, but of spirit. This human has endured every trial and refused to kneel. Therefore, humanity is not prey. Humanity will rise as Elias fell to his knees then, but not in surrender, only because his body could carry no more, his spirit unbroken, his fire still alive. The warlords raged, some pounding their claws into the ground, others roaring in disbelief, yet none dared move against the will of their apex, for his kneeling was law, his kneeling was final, the apex Predator rose slowly, his gaze sweeping across his warlords, silencing their fury. His voice thundered again. Let the galaxy hear, let every empire know that the age of humanity has begun. They are not prey, they are a force beyond conquest. Elias looked up, his vision blurred, his breath.
Hello.
But he saw what no human eyes had ever seen before, the strongest predator of the galaxy, kneeling before a man from Earth. He whispered, through broken lips, as if to himself, to his people, to the stars, we do not kneel. The chamber burned with silence, then roared with the sound of change, the Vorak themselves shifting restless, their empires shaken to its core. The predators who had never known fear now felt it in a way they could not explain, for they had seen prey defy the unbreakable and turn the strongest into one. Who knelt? Elias collapsed finally, his body giving in, as darkness claimed his vision, but his spirit, his fire, echoed. Across the galaxy, the words of his defiance carried not only in the minds of predators, but in the hearts of every species who had ever lived in fear of them, and for the first time in history. The galaxy whispered not of prey, but of humanity and the fire that refused to kneel. The galaxy trembled with whispers the moment the apex predator bent his knee. The moment the strongest hunter of the stars lowered his head before a fragile human, the echoes of that act spread faster than any fleet, faster than light itself carried. In the minds of all who had witnessed it, in secret transmissions and hushed voices, in the quiet terror of empires, who realized that everything had changed. The human colony of Lyris's 9 families stood under the shadow of the alien warship. They had waited for destruction, they had prayed for survival. Instead, they watched the skies shimmer with strange lights as a message spread through every channel. Humanity was no longer prey. Humanity was no longer hunted. Humanity had made the predator. Kneel on Earth, the great cities froze in silence as the broadcast arrived. Every screen, every tower, every home carried the image of Elias, standing broken and bleeding yet unbowed before the warlord of warlords, and the impossible sight of that warlord. Kneeling, entire crowds wept, people fell to their knees, not in submission but in awe, their voices rising in one chorus. We do not kneel in the halls of other empires. Rulers of alien worlds grip their thrones, some with fear, some with anger, some indict, some with hunger. The reptilian shall, who had always called humans vermin, now hissed in unease. The crystalline empires, who had never feared anyone, felt cracks of doubt. The old scavenger clans, who had long bowed to Vorak hunters, whispered that perhaps humanity was the new power, perhaps humanity was the storm that would sweep away the old. Orderboat not all saw it with awe. In the dark corners of the galaxy, shadows stirred warlords of lesser empires, plotted already, their voices sharp with dread. If the Vorak bow, then what are we before humanity? If humanity could break the predator's will, then who will stop them? If humans rise too far, they must be struck before they become. Untouchably in the flagship, the apex predator rose, his towering form once again filling the chamber, his warlords. Still restless, torn between fury and shock, his voice rumbled like thunder. Enough silence. You have seen what I have seen, you have felt what I have felt. This human has proven what no prey ever has. And now it is our law. Humanity is not prey, their fire will burn with ours. Their rise will shape the galaxy. Warlords growled, their fangs flashing their claws, scraping stone, but not one dared to defy their apex, for his kneeling had bound them. All his command had rewritten the law of predators. For Aurelius lay broken on the floor, his chest heaving, his eyes half closed, yet even in his weakness he felt the weight of the moment. He had not only survived, he had changed the course of the stars. He whispered faintly, though no one was near enough to hear, a promise carried only by the echo of his breath. Humanity will never kneel. When he awoke again, he was aboard a human ship orbiting Lyris. 9 medics rushed around him, leaders of the assembly spoke in hushed voices. They told him the truth. The Vorak had left without a strike, without a demand, leaving only their bow and a message carried across the stars that humanity was now marked as something greater. The galaxy did not rest, though far from Earth. Fleets began to move, secret alliances formed, whispers of war spread. Some species sought to ally with humanity to shield themselves under their fire. Others plotted in the dark to destroy them before they grew too strong. The predator's bow had not ended fear, it had shifted it. Humanity was no longer hunted, it was now watched. It was now Marcadelius stood weak but unbroken. He looked upon the stars knowing what the predator had known long before anyone else. Was not an end, it was a beginning, and beginnings carried danger as much as hope he remembered. The final words of the predator spoken not to him, but to his own kind. Let the galaxy. Here the age of humanity has begun. So it began on Lyris 9. Children who had once hidden now played under open skies, no longer fearing shadows above on earth. Crowds filled the streets with light candles. Fires, torches raised high in unity across colonies. Messages spread of courage, of pride. Humans who had once felt small under the weight of greater empires now walked taller for the first time. They believed that they were more than survivors. They were something unstoppable. In the farthest edges of the void, ancient watchers stirred beings older. Then the Vorak empires, hidden in silence for eons, now whispered among themselves, the predators have bent, but the true hunters have not awakened. Yet humanity may have risen, but their fire will draw the eyes of things far darker, things that never. Nelilius stood before the assembly leaders, his body scarred, his voice steady. Though quiet, they asked him what he saw in the predator's eyes when it bowed, and he told them not triumph, not defeat, respect and fear, and something else, a warning. He told them the bow was not a gift, it was a burden. Humanity now carried the weight of expectation, the weight of danger. If we rise too far too fast, the galaxy will unite not to honor us, but to crush us. We must stand, but we must be ready. His words carried through every council chamber, through every fleet command room, through every colony message beacon. They echoed in hearts already burning with pride, and already trembling with fear. The story of Elias became a legend, told not as a tale of war, but as a tale of spirit. Humans who heard it knew one truth, clear and simple: we do not kneel it. In the silence of night, when Elias stood alone watching the stars, he felt a shadow deep inside. He remembered the visions the predator had given him, the temptation of power, the thrones, the fleets, the empire he could have claimed, and he knew the truth. The greatest danger was not the predators, not the empires, not even the ancient watchers. It was humanity itself, for the line between standing tall and seeking to dominate was thin, too thin, and the fire that protected them could one day consume them still. He did not bow to that fear. He stood as he always had, straight, very scarred, but unbroken, and whispered again the words that had carried him through every trial: we do not kneel and across the stars. The words carried through voices and whispers and legends. Prey who once hid repeated them, warriors who once mocked repeated them, even predators in secret repeated them, words simple, yet unshakable, words that shook the galaxy itself. And so the age of humanity began, not with conquest, not with empire, but with defiance and with fire. But the galaxy is vast, the galaxy is dark, and while predators bowed today, tomorrow would bring others. Who would not? Tomorrow would bring storms yet unseen, and in that storm, humanity would either stand taller than ever or fall forever into Shadowwand. So the stars burned on silent, watching, waiting as humanity took its first steps into legend.